Hey everybody, it's Mike. What's going on? Just coming to the end of my day. I wasn't going to make a video on this, but I'm going to, so whatever. Elitism. So the dust is finally settling on the last two top fives, which if any of you followed the channel, will know I said specifically some people are going to love one of these videos and hate the other one. Absolutely, because people really just flock to whatever their personal opinion is. So top five videos, which was 40 Man was great, 40 Man was bad. So people who loved 40 Man were like, yeah, I love this 40 Man rating. And then when they saw this 40 Man was bad, they're like, no, this is horrible. And then vice versa. So that's okay. That's fine. But what has come out of this is this idea of what is expected of you as a raider. And really sort of, and I have to say this, really misguided views on what is expected you of a raider and what is and is not actually just like the bare minimum standards that you should really be adhering to when you're going to be a raider. Now, I don't usually read the YouTube comments after the first day or so. Frankly, I just get too many. There's no way I can possibly do that. I'd never get anything done. And what happened is that people pointed out certain comments, which I went and checked, because they were being upvoted like towards the top. And then I got some emails on the back of this, sort of backing this up, but in a much lengthier kind of attitude. I had to save one, and I've called it the LFR Bible. A little sarcastic, I know, but it was so full of just absolute drivel, in my opinion, anyway, just nonsense garbage, that it really had to be. I want to put it on a poster and just think, this is why I made my channel, to stop this. I want it on a wall, and I want to remind it every day that people genuinely believe these kinds of things. And this is what we're fighting against. This is why this channel exists. This is why I did it in the first place. This is why I made sure that every class can be taken from a basic to a top end level. Let's not forget, and I'm proud of it, that we've taken people who've never raided and are now raiding in the top 2 guilds in the world. And we did that. We did that. And so this idea of elitism, this word gets thrown around, elitism. And I tweeted about it earlier, is people, I don't think you know what elitism means. Some of you, this is a very vocal minority, by the way, not most of you by any means, but it's still an issue that's in people's minds. So everybody else should be aware that people genuinely believe this. Okay, they believe it with all their hearts. So most of the stuff obviously came from why 40 Man sucked, and the reasons I brought to light is, this sucked, and from that, people were like, this is why I don't raid anymore, because of people like this shitting all over my gaming experience. Wow, really? And this was kind of the crux on the back of the email. I've got to say, some people are posting it in drama time as well. I got some people was like, yeah, they said that in drama time too. I wish people would really understand, but it's an impossibility to get that message out that Drama Friday is obviously exaggerated for the sake of entertainment. Let's be honest. There's stories about World of Warcraft that we try and make funny in some fashion. So what happened in the 40 Man rating, and why did people see that as elitist? I couldn't work it out at first. I've got to be honest. I mean, I wrote that video. I took a long time to write it, several days, in fact, to make sure that the points were what I believed, and of course, I expressed them in a funny way. Which I need to point out the irony, and believe me, it is not lost on me that we're looking at the serious aspects of a video where I got kicked in the head by a 3-month-old baby. So take from that what you will, but this is an issue you guys have brought up, or some of you have brought up, so we should talk about it. So let's talk about some of the reasons people had big problems. The voice comms part. It was incredibly annoying to have so many people, and because it's everything in 40 Man is magnified, and that's what the attitude I went in with. If it's a problem in 10, it's double as bad in 25, if not worse, 2.5 times if you want to be accurate. And then of course it's quadrupled in 40 Man. The problems you have that are annoying in 10 are then quadrupled, they're magnified exponentially as we move up on types of people. So voice comms was a big problem back in the day, and it was because there were so many people that it was actually difficult to sort of manage if everybody was on voice comms. It was really annoying because once you see a list of 39, 37 names at least, trying to count them is an absolute waste of time. You're not going to do that. I've never done that. And then people would. You get the white knighters kind of thing. You would count those names out and say, well, we're missing 3 people. And then they compare it to the 40 people in a raid and then try and marry up who were the guys that were missing. And then you'd have people with different names on voice comms compared to their guild names. So they might be called Death Slayer XXX in guild, but they're called Tony on Ventrilo. And you're like, who's Tony? Why is he in our guild chat? Oh, that's Death Killer XXX and whatnot. So in 40-man, it was a big problem because although the bosses were incredibly simple, which is what I pointed out there, is with so many people, there's so much that can go wrong that you need really easy bosses. That's just the science of it, really. The more people you add, the kind of easier the boss has to get in order to be reliably killed by the majority of players. But still, some communication was required, obviously. And when you have so many people who dodge being part of that communication process, especially with so many things going on at once in a 40-man raid, it creates huge problems. And that player, and this is the point of it, that player who's like, I'm not joining voice comms. Not doing it. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You shouldn't ask me to do that. Oh my God, you want me to do what? I'm just playing a game here. Jesus Christ, it's just a game. That kind of guy then becomes a huge burden to everybody else. And they don't appreciate that in the least. And in fact, that's where the elitism thing comes from. It's like, oh my God, you want me to join voice comms? I don't want to do that. You're such an elitist prick. You've got to get on voice. This guild requires you to be on voice comms. Oh, I'm not putting up with that shit. The reason is when you're not in quite quick communication, especially when you're raiding, and especially now in the state of the game, it creates massive problems because you're now just a burden to everybody. You are, whether you realize it or not, or whether you disagree, you are. Okay, having a big thing is like having this kind of factual evidence, but it is it's you're a burden. Let's make it easy. Suppose you're a healer, and I don't know, you're a holy priest, and your tank is desperate for a cooldown. He's used all his cooldowns. The other healers have used theirs, and he's saying, "I need guardian spirit or whatever, or a pain suppression if he was this." And you can get the idea. He needs a cooldown. What you're actually doing, because you're refusing to join voice comms for whatever reason it might be, is you're then creating the situation where you're actually asking that guy, because of your inability to go what you believe is an extra mile, to then stop playing. He has to stop playing while he's tanking and he's about to die. He's panicking because he needs a cooldown. And to stop and start typing out messages. That's the only other way he can communicate with you. And then you're also suggesting, and I in the email, and I find this so rude, really rude, is, oh, they could just make a macro for me. They could just make a macro because it's none of their business why I don't want to join voice comms or whatever. They can make a macro for me. I mean, just realize what you're asking there is that everybody else has to do something special for you because of your reason that because it's unreasonable for you to join voice comms. There are certainly legitimate reasons why some people can't join voice comms, but they're so obscure that in the vast majority of cases, it's just simply a lack of wanting to. For whatever reason, I have no. In the video, I pointed out that people used to say I have no microphone. Well, nobody wants anybody to join voice comms and start singing. What we want to do is be able to communicate with you in some fashion, to be able to ask you to do things such as, can you please move, or to remind you that you have the giant bomb of death on you because you might not be the best player, and certainly if you think it's well above and beyond reason to do things like join voice comms, you're probably not the best or experienced player, let's be honest. That's just probably the case of it. And it's not an offensive thing, and it's not because you're a noob, it's because we want to be able to communicate with you. If somebody dies and we want you to replace them, we need to tell you that now. What we don't want to do is have people stop playing and start typing. Nobody wants to do that, and you're actually making a huge burden to the raid by acting in that way. You really are. Another aspect that people thought was elitist was the suggestion of being able to contribute to the fight because of your PC. It's a touchy subject, and I've had some rough roads with this in the past, but I still don't understand it. And you feel free to correct me here. The idea I brought up in specifically was Thaddeus. And that people couldn't cope with that fight. Now, it's not just Thaddeus. I don't want people to focus on Thaddeus and say, well, that was a very technically challenging fight. Lots and lots of fights are graphically intensive in one way or another. But every one of these fights requires people to perform certain actions in order to kill the boss. Okay? You need to contribute. And this comes down to it. You need to contribute to that fight. Otherwise, why are you in the raid? Okay? It's not elitist. It isn't. You're asking to play the game. That's not elitist. Asking you to be able to play the game is not an elitist attitude. That is, in fact, the very extreme bare minimum of what people are asking to do. You are in a raid where you expect to gain glory, achievement, titles, and loot. You expect the guild to be distributing loot to you in an appropriate fashion. That's what we expect of the guild. The guild expects you to be able to play the fight. At least, right? That's the bare minimum. Some players have a much bigger burden, such as having to cope with the individual tasks, which are absolutely required, otherwise the raid fails. But in general, we're asking people to be able to play the fight. We don't want to get to a fight, and imagine if more than one of these players exists, where they can't simply handle the fight. They just see a GIF, and they can't do anything. They can't do any damage, can't do any healing, can't dispel, can't interrupt, can't do a goddamn thing. And then they die. And people get really pissed off when they get replaced for that. And I totally disagree with it. And I don't think that's elitist at all. Because all we're asking anybody to do in that situation is to be able to play the fight. And if you are saying, I cannot contribute to the fight in any reasonable way, then you're going to get replaced. And that's not like, oh, you're being elitist because I can't afford a new PC. What reason would any player have to bring somebody who can't contribute? We're now doing a 9-player raid because of this situation. We don't want to do 9-player. This boss is designed for 10. I don't want to do 9 players. I don't want to do 24. I don't want to do 23. I don't want to do 22. I don't want to do that. I don't want that extra pressure on everybody else. You're now creating a problem for everybody else. It's not elitist. It really isn't, and you shouldn't think that way. It's not my fault. This is the kind of thing I hear, is it's not my fault I can't afford a very bare bones PC. Because of course in the emails it was exaggerated to huge proportions. Oh, what I'm saying, this is what they took away from the video, is what I'm saying is that you must have 120 FPS on Mega Ultra, otherwise you're useless to the raid. Now, of course, I never would say that, because that is absolutely incredibly stupid. That is the epitome of idiocy. Absolute epitome of idiocy. What people are asking is that you're able to play. That you're able to see what you need to do in the fight, and you're able to actually contribute in some meaningful way. Just as everybody else in the raid has to contribute in some meaningful way. Otherwise the boss won't die. If we brought 10 people together who all had GIF screens, and were just stood there doing this, do you think that boss would die? Of course not. Maybe LFR. But it wouldn't happen, right? It just wouldn't happen. And therefore, you shouldn't be expecting people to pick that slack up for you. You shouldn't expect to be this counterweight, this absolute total weight on everybody's shoulders, and then claim their attitude is wrong for not coping with your problem, where your problem is that you're not doing anything beneficial to us. There's a lot of instances where some people have caused such large problems that it's actually easier for them not to be there. I would like to take you back to the Immortal. The Immortal was a Nax Ramus 25 achievement where it simply put, nobody could die throughout the raid. I think it was just on the bosses. You could die on trash, but on the bosses you had to live. And this really highlighted to us a lot of people who needed to be replaced, because during that time of transition from TBC to Wrath of the Lich King, of course you go through some sort of uneasy period where people are leaving, you're getting a load of new recruits, and we had some new recruits, and they would die pretty regularly, and it would be a pain, but because Nax 25 is actually relatively easy, it wasn't a major issue. Just to set the scenario for you. But we noted, as officers and whatever, you note people who die all the time. Of course you do. If they can't survive, you're not really going to bring them to when the serious fights come along. So when Nax 25 Immortal achievement became our priority, we cleared all the content, it became more apparent that these guys just wouldn't survive no matter how many chances they had to learn the fight. Because a lot of people say, believe, and again, took this away from the video, although I never said it, which is a common theme amongst these kind of things, is that if you don't know every single detail about the fight, then you are a noob. Well, no, because I have never read up about a fight since about Wrath of the Lich King time before I tried it at least once. Because I only ever get to try a new boss once. I wait and see what he throws at me. I wait and see what he throws at me, and I learn, and I read the tooltips, I read debuffs that get on me, but that's me, that's the way I enjoy to play the game. Some people dungeon jail beforehand, but a lot of people go in there saying, I don't know anything about this fight, and I'm not prepared to learn, and anybody who tries to sell me that that's wrong is a noob, and, you know, you're saying that I must know everything about this game in order to play the game. And that's sort of very defensive, and it's just ridiculous. When you say things like that, it really comes across as ridiculous. You know, how dare you not know? I think one of these comments, let me read this, was hilarious. It was something like, how dare you not be fully knowledgeable about the game? Nobody says that, right? We're just hoping you're prepared to learn. And when raid leaders ask, because I kind of think a lot of this came from LFR and Flex, I want to say, and Pugs more than anything, than actual raiding. But to be an actual non-contributory part of a raid continuously is a big problem. So in Nax 25, during the Immortal, we asked a question which revealed a lot of things. Was, hey, if your PC can't handle this fight, just wait outside. Just do that. Instantly, 4 or 5 people were like, yeah, my PC can't handle this fight. Now, we assumed at least 60% of those were people who could handle the fight but didn't want to screw it up for other people, and therefore took the safer option to wait outside. Which you can totally see. If you're really bad under pressure, you can't cope under pressure at all, even of a video game, then if someone gives you an option to be part of it but not, then you're probably going to take that. But there was certainly a couple of people who we were like, we kind of suspected this guy is actually just watching a flickering slideshow of the fights all the time, because his damage was very, very average, usually at the bottom. And for his gear, it was nowhere near applicable and so on. And therefore, we had to replace that guy. And you might say, oh, God, but he was a member of the guild. He was a member of the guild who wasn't contributing in any fashion. And that's really unfair to everybody else. It's really unfair. I think it's incredibly unfair and rude to say things like, hey, I can't handle this fight. You guys need to cope with it, and you shouldn't replace me because I'm a member of the team. What you're suggesting then, this is what we hear from that side of the coin, is you're demanding a raid spot, you want fair distribution of loot, you want to make sure that every time you log in, you get to come and be a part of everything we do. You are not going to contribute in any fashion towards attaining that goal. Now you can see there's a very large disparity there. That's a problem. It's a problem, and it doesn't make any sense. And you wouldn't expect anybody to do that to you, but a lot of people expect that to happen to them. Which is just, it's baffling to me. But this exists. This mentality actually exists, where they're not going to contribute, but still are in the rights to get very angry about the fact that they might be replaced for this situation and this lack of contribution. Okay? I found that very, very bizarre. A lot of people get so angry about these kinds of things, and I don't really understand it. I don't think they really get what elitism is. It's weird. I've never been really offended by a lot of comments people have said about my videos. I get called the ugliest man alive, as well as a god among men every day, which is fine. It's the internet. You know, I tell people I love them all the time. But to see that people take some of these things as elitist and then to realize what they're talking about, I find very offensive. I do. I find it genuinely very offensive to say things like being able to communicate with you is asking you to go the extra mile above and beyond what is required of you as a gamer who's part of a team-based game. And also to then suggest that being able to actually contribute in some fashion to the raid while in a raid guild is also an elitist attitude. And to say, it's not my fault I can't afford a new PC. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. I understand. I've been there. I've had horrible, horrible computers throughout most of my life. And I'm certainly not somebody to say, well, fuck you. But I will say is, but surely you can understand that we need to replace you because of this. Because you can't contribute to the fight. It's not your fault, but it isn't ours either. Right? The fact that you don't have a PC... I mean, we're talking about, what, 20 FPS is easily playable for World of Warcraft. Easy on low settings. 20 FPS on low settings, to give an example, is perfectly reasonable to play a raid. It is. If you turn everything down and have 20 FPS, you can do fine. As long as you can see things on the floor, which are usually a big giant square or whatever they are, and interrupt and do your job. That's it. Just to do what you're there to do. If you're there as a damage dealer, to do damage. And if you can't do that, why would the raid have to tolerate that? Why would they have to do that? Why would they not want to replace you for that? It's not their fault. It's not your fault if you can't afford anything, but that's okay. Nobody's calling you a pauper, or some twat in your guild might call you that. But I'm not calling you that. But what I am saying is you shouldn't expect everybody else to deal with that situation because of that. You shouldn't. It's my opinion. Alright guys, see you later. Bye.